Today we are going to look at IS 17, which is leases, and we'll cover the topic through the following content outlined in the notes. The first part of the content is frequently used terms in lease. The second, definition of terms used in lease. Third, types of lease. I'll start again. Frequently used terms in lease. Definition of terms used in lease. Types of lease. Then 4, treatment of lease in land and building. 5, calculations relating to lease. Then the final one, which is 6, disclosure requirements of lease. So we'll cover these 6 bullet points over the course of our lectures, which I'll divide into two sections because of the length of lease teaching. This will be part 1. Then further classes will have part 2 as the second part of the lease treatment. So first we'll go into the introduction, and it says IS 17 prescribes the accounting treatment of leased assets in financial statements of parties to a lease, leaseor or leasee. Frequently used terms. That's the first part of bullet points that we're going to be treating in the content here. We have the frequently used terms in lease. The first one is the leaseor. Who is the leaseor? Second one, the leasee. Who is the leasee? And the third and very important point is the lease itself. So we'll look at the definition of each one of them. We'll start from the leaseor. First, the leaseor, a person or entity that offers his or its assets for lease. A leaseor is a person, leaseor, a person that offers, that's the key word there, his or its, for the entity part, assets for lease. And the second frequently used term that we're going to be using throughout the lectures is the leasee. It's a person or entity that receives. The first one, the leaseor, offers. Second one, the leasee receives a leased asset in exchange for periodic payments to the leaseor of the asset. I'll take it again. A person, that's the leasee now, or entity that receives a leased asset in exchange for periodic payments to the leaseor. The leaseor is the person that offers. Now the leasee pays periodic payments to him in exchange for using an asset that is owned by the leaseor. Then we'll go over to the third frequently used definition, which is lease itself, which is a core word in IS 17. Now, lease is a manner of obtaining use of an asset without purchasing it outrightly. Now, important keywords have been outlined or highlighted in blue for us to quickly jot down, because I know that the lectures might be too fast to some people, but seeing the points in blue, you can quickly jot them down because they are very important. Now, a lease, a manner of obtaining use of an asset without purchasing it outrightly. That's the definition of the lease. So would go on. The person or entity that owns the asset, that's the leaseor. The person or entity that owns the asset, that is the leaseor, allows another party, that is the leasee, to use the asset he owns for a specific period of time in return for a series of rental payments. I'll take everything again. The person or entity that owns the assets, the owner of the assets, the legal owner of the assets is the lessor, allows another party, that is the lessee, to use the asset he owns for a specified period of time in return for a series of rental payments, in return for a series of payments. Then definition of the second bullet point, second important part, is the definition of terms used in IAS 17 leases. First one would have, I think, nine of them. First one is inception of lease. Second, commencement of lease. The third, lease term or term of lease. The fourth, economic life. The fifth, useful life. The sixth, residual value. Seventh, minimum lease payment. Eighth, interest rate implicit in the lease. And finally, non-cancelable lease, which is the ninth one. I'll take it again. The first, inception of lease. Second, commencement of lease. Third, lease term or term of lease. The fourth, economic life. The fifth, useful life. The sixth, residual value. Seventh, minimum lease payment. Eighth, interest rate implicit in the lease. Ninth and the final one, non-cancelable lease. Then we'll go over to the first, which is the inception of the lease. According to the notes here, the inception of the lease is the word earlier was highlighted there. The earlier date between one, the date the lease agreement was made, that is the date of the lease agreement, and the date of commitment by all parties to the provision of the lease agreed upon. I'll say it again. This is the earlier date between one, the date the lease agreement was made, as the date the contract was signed or the agreement was made formally or informally, and the date of commitment by all parties to the provisions of the lease. Sometimes one can come before another, especially in informal agreements. The date of commitment by parties can come before the agreement. So we'll continue. The earlier of both is selected, and at that date, the first thing you do at that date, out of one the two highlighted above, is the lease is classified as a type of lease. You would either pick the type of lease, which I would say later. There are two types of lease, but I would reveal it later. And the amount of the lease to be paid are determined. All costs and payments to be made are to be determined at that point. Then the third is inception, is plainly the date parties agreed to be committed to the terms of a lease, whether it is on the date of drafting the agreement or days after. This is substantially different from the date of commencement of the lease, which is our second word we'll be looking at, second phrase we'll be looking at. Second one, commencement of the lease. It is the date the lessee is the person who obtains the assets in exchange for periodic payments, as we said before, becomes entitled to use the assets, exercise right on the assets. I'll repeat it again. It is the date the lessee becomes entitled to use the assets, While the first one, which we were given before, inception of lease, is the earlier date between the lease agreement, the date of the lease agreement, and the date of commitment, which is different, from the commencement of the lease. Which is different from the commencement of the lease. That is the date the leasee becomes entitled to use the asset. We'll give examples shortly before the calculation aspect of this topic, which will be in our part 2. Then we'll continue. When this date is known, then that's when the date of commencement of lease is known, then it becomes the date of recognition of the lease in the books of accounts. Initial recognition, that's for the first time, as either assets, liabilities, expense, or an income. Then it becomes the date the lessee starts to use the asset. While commencement, you begin to use the asset, you commence to use the asset. Inception of lease is when the agreement itself was made. Most times, inception of lease comes before the commencement of the lease. Now, the date of inception does most times come before the date of commencement of the lease, as we said before. If there's any change in the lease agreement terms between these two dates, if there's any change between the days if there's any change in between the date of inception and the date of commencement, the change is treated as if it occurred at the first date, and that first date is the date of inception of the lease, when the terms of the lease are discussed and agreed upon. Also note that the date of inception, the terms of the lease are discussed and agreed. Date of commencement, that is when it is recorded in the books and the lessee has entitlement to use the asset he is to lease. Then go over to the third one, that's the lease term. It says the lease term is a non-cancelable period for which the lessee has made a contract, an agreement to lease the asset, together with any further terms for which the lessee, as the person leasing, the person obtaining the asset, has an option to continue to lease the asset with or without further payment when at inception of the lease, that is the date of agreement, taking care of that. It is reasonably certain that the lessee would exercise the option. Now would continue. Lease terms have 2 stages. Now in brief, the place highlighted is that the lease term is a non-cancelable period for which the lessee has made a contract to lease the asset. The other part of the definition would be linked to subsequent notes. Now we have 2 stages of the lease term, which would explain the other parts of the definition of the lease term. The first of the stages is the primary stage, then the second is the option period to extend. The addition of stage 2, the option period to extend, is a likely feature of finance lease, and we'll know why shortly. The primary stage, this is why the primary stage accounts for the lessor receiving payments from leasing his assets. The primary stage accounts for the lessor receiving payments from leasing his assets. He, the lessor, as the person leasing, recovers substantially all his costs of buying the assets at the primary stage, he recovers substantially all his costs of buying the assets he leased out, then obviously with an interest as gain to him at this primary stage. At the primary stage, which is the first stage of a lease term, in that primary stage, the leaser or the person leasing recovers most of his um, amount he used to buy the assets, substantially all his costs he used to buy the assets he leased out with an interest. So if the primary stage is 10 years and he bought the assets for say 1 million naira, he recovers 970,000 in the primary stage plus his interest. The primary stage has taken over most of the cost of his assets, or he could even recover more than the cost of the assets. That's part of the primary stage. That's the 10 years period. Then the second one is the option period to extend. Usually has small or no rental payments. Usually has small or no rental payments at all from the leasee. Here the leasee has a very little amount to pay or no rental payment at all, and the leasee is the person using the asset to the leaseor as the person lending the asset. This is because at the primary stage, the leaseor had already recovered a substantial part of the cost, or even more than his cost, that he used to purchase the assets he leased out, hence the reduced payment to him in this stage. At this stage, he had already recovered most of his costs, so the fees or the charges that he gives out become substantially lower at this stage of the lease term. Now, this has already explained the part of the definition here, together with any future lease, together with any further terms for which the leasing person is in has an option to continue leasing the asset here with or without further payment when at inception of the lease, that is the date of agreement, it is reasonably certain that the lessee would exercise the option. And we'll continue from where we stopped down here. And done with here. Go to the fourth one, economic life, as the fourth definition out of I think 9. And it says this is the period which the asset lease is economically usable by one or more users. Please note the word economically usable by one or more users, or the number of production to be obtained or gotten from the use of the asset leased by one or more users. The main word here is economically usable. The period which the asset used is economically usable by one or more users. This definition is useful life. You would note here that useful life and economic life are not the same. They are not the same, but in some instances they could mean the same thing, and I'll explain with the definition. It is the estimated remaining period as the useful life. Estimated remaining period. Now note this, from the commencement of the lease term, that is the date that is the leasee, starts using the lease asset. I'll take it again. It is the estimated remaining period from the commencement of the lease term, that is the date that's the leasee starts using the leased asset, over the period where the leasee enjoys economic benefits from using the asset. Now, this useful life is related to a single usee, the period in which he enjoys using the assets and gets economic benefit from using the assets, while the economic life is the total lifespan of the assets that is being leased. That's the major difference between both of them. In simple words, economic life, that's the lifespan of the assets that is lived, while useful life, the period party, one party, as the leasee, is going to enjoy benefits from using the assets, starting from the point he begins to use the asset, and that is the date of commencement. Starting from the date of commencement till when his lease term expires. Now, we would know that if an asset is leased, if an asset has an economic life of 10 years and a leasee leases or gets the asset for a period of 10 years too, you note that the useful life and the economic life are both the same. But in some situations, you could have the lessor leasing the assets to one or more leases. The first one could have 5 years, the second one could have 2 years, and the third one could have, let's say, 3 years. In total, the economic life is 10 years, but to each leasee, useful life 5 years for the first one, 3 years for the second one, 2 years for the third one. That's the major difference. Then we'll move over to the sixth definition out of the 9 of them: residual value. The value of leased assets at the end of the lease agreement. It is the value of the leased assets at the end of the lease agreement. Residual value of the assets could be guaranteed or unguaranteed. Now we'll go into them gradually. In lease contracts, there are 2 points of view. The first is the lease's view, and second is the lessor's point of view. Two parties coming to make an agreement, and both of them have two views concerning the agreement. Now, the guaranteed residual value from the lessee's point of view, from the person who is obtaining the assets and paying periodic cash to the lessor. It says it is any part of the residual value of the assets after lease that is guaranteed by him as the lessor, or any party related to him, any party related to the lessor. So those are the two main areas. Then guaranteed residual value from the lessor's point of view. Before we treated the lessee, now we are treating the lessor. They are two entirely different things, but you could find out that the lessee's point of view is also inside the lessor's point of view, but the lessor's point of view covers one more extra thing which we would take note of here. The first, it is any part of the residual value also guaranteed by the lessor, like the lessee this time, lessee is still lessee, any party related to the lessee, any other third party at all, as long as it is not related to him, that is the lessor. I'll take it again. The first two are the same thing in the lessee's point of view, but the difference here is the third one, which is any other party at all, as long as it is not related to him, that is the lessor. So we have 3 things to note here, while the other we have 2, and the 2 is inside the 3. So that is, from a lessor's point of view, as long as it is guaranteed by anyone other than him or a party related to him, then he considers the residual value as guaranteed. Guaranteeing that unguaranteed residual values might affect how we classify the lease. The 7th definition is minimum lease payment. The same 2 views apply here from the lessor's point and the lessee's point. We start with the lessor's point, the person who is offering his asset. It is the payment he expects to receive as benefit from leasing his assets, payments he expects to receive in total from leasing his asset, or the lessee's point of view is the payments he expects to make or pay as fee for using an asset he receives as a lease. Both viewpoints could be the same value if the asset is leased out only to one lessee as before, because there could be several lessees over the economic life of the asset. If there are many leases, that should be leases over the economic life of the assets, then each lessee will have lower minimum lease payments to that of the lessor, which covers all of them. That means each of the lessee's minimum lease payments would be part of the total minimum lease payment of the lessor. So also will the economic life, the whole period of use, be different from the useful life to each one of the user of the assets, as we've mentioned before. Now, if the lessee has an option to purchase the assets at the option period, it is added to the value of the minimum lease payment. I'll repeat it again. If the lessee has an option to purchase the assets at the option period, it is added to the value of the minimum lease payment. And I'll go to the eighth definition, which is the interest rate implicit in the lease. The eighth one, which is the interest rate implicit in the lease. This is the discount rate that at inception of the lease causes the aggregate present value (PV) of minimum lease payment and unguaranteed residual value to be equal to the sum of fair value of leased assets plus any initial direct cost of the leaseor. Now you can represent this mathematically with English terms. Plus equal to plus, you could put it mathematically like that. Then I'll repeat it again, is the discount rate that at inception of the lease causes the aggregate present value of minimum lease payments and unguaranteed residual value, the balance at the end of the lease term, to be equal to the fair value of the leased asset plus any initial direct cost of the lessee. It is the point where net present value (NPV) equal to 0. It is also the percentage that makes net present value (NPV) equal to 0, the percentage that makes the lessor break even his revenue and costs at present value figures. Initial direct costs are incremental costs that are directly attributable to negotiating and arranging a lease, except for costs of a manufacturer or dealer lessor. This will be treated later. We'll know who a manufacturer or dealer lessor is. The 9, non-cancelable lease. These are leases. These leases are only cancelable when a remote contingency occurs with the permission of the lessor too. The lessee enters a new lease for the same or equivalent assets with the same lessor. Then payment is made by the lessee at inception of the lease, and continuation of the lease is reasonably certain. Then we'll go to lease and lease back transactions. Occurs when an entity leases an asset to an investor and the investor leases back the asset to the entity. This is usually done for tax benefits. In substance, they are not treated as leases. Lease and lease back transactions are not leases, they are done for tax benefits. Determination of any lease should be based on substance rather than legal form. Any lease you'd want to determine should be based on substance rather than the legal form of the lease. And we have types of lease: finance lease, first one; operating lease, the second one. Then finance lease is the lease that transfers substantially all the risks and reward incidental to ownership of an asset. I'll take it again. It is the lease that transfers substantially all the risk and rewards incidental to the ownership of an asset. Title of ownership may not eventually be transferred. And we have how to identify finance leases in examination questions. First way is the transfer of ownership of the lease at the end of the lease term. As the first one, there is a transfer of ownership at the end of the lease term. Second one is the lessee has an option to purchase the asset at an agreed price substantially lower than the fair value of the asset, and highly probable that the lessee will exercise his buy option. Third one, the term of the lease is a major part of the economic life of the leased asset. If the leased asset has 10 years economic life, then the term of the lease, if it takes, let's say, 8 years, but there's no a definite benchmark given by IAS standard, but it should take substantially all the parts of the term of the asset. At the inception of the lease, the present value of all future lease payments amount substantially equal to the fair value of the leased asset. Leased assets at is leased assets is of a specialized nature that can only be used by the lessee. Then, if the lessee cancels the lease agreement, the lessor's losses will be borne by the lessee. I'll take it again. If the lessee cancels the lease agreement, the lessor's losses will be borne by the lessee. Gains or losses from fluctuations in fair value of residual amounts of the assets accrue to the lessee. The lessee has the ability to continue for a secondary period, that's the option period, at an amount substantially lower than the market rents. That's the final way to identify them. Then what are risks? Risks are possibilities of losses from: first one, idle capacity; second one, technological obsolescence; third one, variations in returns caused by changes in economic condition. What are rewards? Rewards are represented by expectations of: one, profitable use of assets over its economic life; second, gains from increase in value or profits on that should be disposal of assets. Finance lease is as the same position as borrowing money to buy the asset. The lessor is as the provider of such finance. Operating lease, it it is operating lease. It is any other lease apart from finance lease. It is the lease that does not transfer substantially risk and reward incidental to ownership of the asset. As the opposite definition of the finance lease. Sorry. It is the lease that does not transfer substantially risk and reward incidental to ownership of the assets. That's the final part of the lease, definition of the lease. Then types of lessors for both operating and finance leases. First one is finance companies like banks and their subsidiaries. Second one, hire companies, tool hires, car hires, plant hires. Third one, manufacturer or dealer lessor that we treated earlier. We made mention of them earlier. They make assets for immediate lease rather than sale. Some car manufacturers engage in this. and property companies. And finally, in this first part, leasing land and building. In lease of land and buildings, you classify both land and buildings separately. Land is usually an operating lease when leased out due to its indefinite economic lifespan, but however, for longer periods, say lease of 999 years, it could be classified as finance lease if certain conditions are met. Building then follows the normal process of classification as finance lease or operating lease. Then that's all we have for part 1. We'll do part 2 in subsequent classes.